What is up, people? EJ Stewart here, Shamari Stewart here, Kendall Stewart here, back with our weekly edition of our X-Men 97 episode live stream recap and review. This episode we're reviewing today, episode 6, Life Death Part 2. So, several weeks back we had Life Death Part 1, which was half of one episode, where they split the episodes almost like Rugrats, SpongeBob SquarePants style. Here, this was your more typical, one episode with two storylines that play out. One was, of course, a storyline that is the namesake, which is a Storm story centered on her losing her powers and getting her powers back. We get a conclusion to that story. We also get introduced to someone that we were told wasn't alive. We were told that wasn't on the board. Someone that they've treated as dead for every episode of this season so far. Charles Xavier makes his official debut in this episode, and it's a big, obviously, moment. For those who may have seen the clip that they released before this episode, you knew we were going to be getting reintroduced to the Shi'ar Empire. We know that's where Charles was last taken if you watched the end of X-Men, the animated series. And while this show treated him as dead, the season finale of that show essentially puts it as, hey, we're going to try to save him, and we'll just have to see what happens. It leaves it a lot more open-ended than this show has so far. So Charles Xavier is indeed alive. We get to see what he's up to with Alondra and the folks up there in the Shi'ar Empire. And we had a very emotional, very dramatic episode last week. This week, we pull back a little bit, slow it down, and give us a true kind of character growth and character stories with Professor X and Storm. So I'll go to Sham first. Sham, overall thoughts on this episode and how everything played out here?
It was a really cool episode. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, of course, anyone that's been watching our like recaps and reviews of the past several weeks knows that I've been asking where Professor X is, waiting for his arrival. Kind of waiting for that to drop before I can really draw any kind of conclusion about the series as a whole. And I guess the story they're telling. And this, I mean, the way they're telling this story feels right out of the original X-Men show,
Mm.
but with much better animation, obviously. I mean, Gladiator was out here looking like some kind of like Omni-Man or Homelander or something. It's like very impressive. And Yeah, it was awesome. It was really really cool to see, and then Storm getting her powers back, which is basically all I wanted. Since she got her powers taken away, I was like, oh, yep, this is what we needed. This is what I needed. And with an upgrade in terms of the suit as well.
Introduce Charles after what happened last week.
Yeah, I mean, certainly shocking. Certainly shocking. I think we all thought that, we see the name Life Death Part 1, Life Death Part 2. We thought that this would be a full Life Death story. And in fact, it kind of was split up similarly to the last episode with Life Death, except this one was your classic A plot, B plot going back and forth. Um, and again, it was interesting. I almost feel like the title in that sense is maybe a little misleading,
Mm.
um, but it's probably intentional. I don't think they wanted. I know they know the way the game works, where people speculate on everything. They knew that people would know what the episodes of the titles of the episodes were, and they'd speculate what they're about. And Life Death is a pretty, they know what they're doing when it's a pretty obvious
Yeah.
title when
Yep.
you put it out there. So again, they knew that that's what people would be expecting in this episode, and a little bit of a bait and switch in that we did get the Life Death story and the conclusion and the wrap up to that, but we also got, like you said, the return of Charles Xavier, which none of us speculated would happen this soon. I think we all thought if he comes back, it'll probably be in that 3-part finale at some point when we get our first look at Charles Xavier. To have it happen in such a matter of fact fashion was a little bit surprising, but like you said, I think that was the right temperature change from what we got last episode. And this episode really does feel like between both Storm and Charles Xavier, it feels like kind of all right, like that Genosha moment is sort of like a nexus event, a nexus point in this show, and all these are the main characters. There's really no one else out there, and so we got to say, how do we bring everybody back? Not everybody's together right now. Storm's off doing her stuff. Charles Xavier's on another planet. We got to show what those other people have been doing before we all bring them together again next episode. So by the end of this episode, we'll talk about the end of the episode, at the end of the episode. But by the end of the episode, we got to get to a point where Charles is somehow going to be wind up back on Earth. Storm's going to wind up back with the X-Men, and there's this gathering of sorts. And so, because that's what we talked about last week, was that where does Storm fit in all this? What has she been doing while this Genosha thing is happening? And we get that answer in this episode. So I think that is what the purpose of this episode is to kind of catch us up, as opposed to like showing us, like you said, the aftermath. That's going to happen next week. But this was catching us up on the characters that weren't involved directly in the Genosha plot, and showing how they get to how they get to that point. Because ultimately, we asked that question. We asked that question earlier this season multiple times, like we asked with Forge. Like, how did Forge find out, like, where? And we still don't know really the direct answer to that.
It doesn't sound like we'll ever know. But
yeah, I don't know if we ever know. But like in the case of like this, it's like we would have asked like, how did Charles Xavier? Like, if he just showed up, we'd be like, how did he even find out about it?
Right.
Or if Storm just showed up, it's like, what was her reaction when she first saw it? Well, we got that in this episode.
Yeah, so I think for this episode, even though it's life, death, and we do get the conclusions of Storm, in many ways that felt like the B story in this. The fact that Charles Xavier, of course, the leader of the X-Men, the founder of the X-Men, is alive and well and ready to.
It's like, man, it's kind of one of those "what year is this" kind of moments where it's like, man, I feel we've been watching this story for like 20 years now, and it was just. It was done very well. It was crazy seeing, Charles kind of walking. I don't know if he'll want to or be able to take that technology back with him. Or, I mean, if he cares to, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, overall, I thought it was done very well. And I'm excited to see where he goes from here in terms of, how he gets back to Earth, what he brings with him, and how he tries to like save the rest of the X-Men.
I think as we've kind of seen Charles develop, I guess evolve and develop, not just in live action or animation, but also in the comics. Most importantly, I think we've kind of had this understanding that Charles Xavier is somewhat a morally great character to some degree. He is not necessarily just this kind of goody two shoes, and there's aspects to him that aren't that great. And I actually really, and I thought, for what it's worth, watching back some old episodes of the X-Men animated series, I think they did a better job of that than people remember. Like the X-Men episode, they make it very clear, like he was like just like terrible, like he was a terrible leader for Iceman. He was a terrible father figure for Iceman. He may have been good for everybody else, but like his style of like nurturing and mentoring was not good for Bobby Drake, and that's why Bobby Drake left the team. Like, so they put some hints of that in there, but again, we're talking about the 90s, and the 90s at that point in time, they hadn't even fully went into like what exactly makes Charles tick and what are some of his character flaws. I kind of like this episode, Kendall, and then the fact that I thought that this one really kind of showed a little bit of who Charles is. Like, Charles is extremely manipulative, and I think at one point, even like Lalandra, one of them says, you're not. It's not that he's just a manipulator. It's like that easy. Clearly, like he does it with a smile. He does it with a little smirk and a little corny saying. But I mean, he's a manipulative guy, and this whole thing is like a manipulative game. Like he plays the game where he's willing to say, okay, yes, I will quote unquote lay it all down and forget everything about the Earth and the X-Men, if I can have Lalandra. And you knew he wasn't gonna go through with that. So what his plan was actually, I'm gonna say I'm gonna do it, but I'm actually gonna then actually school these primitive people, and like he calls them that. He's like, y'all barbarians, and like, look, the Shi'ar are barbarians. Like they are kind of like just shoot first, ask questions later, think they're better than everybody. Like he reads them in a way that is accurate, but he's so pompous about it, and he's so like holier than thou about it. Like this, I thought, Kendall, I don't know how you felt. I thought this was a really great, like, I love this episode for that. Like, I felt like I'm watching this and I'm like, Charles is not wrong, but man, this guy is like so pompous. He thinks he's so smart. He thinks he's so above everybody. He thinks everyone else is like, even though he claims that is the issue with the Shi'ar, like, I like seeing him in this light because he's, as Shamari said earlier, he's so Charles Xavier. And Charles Xavier is kind of extra.
Yeah, I mean the best live action depiction of Charles Xavier's arrogance is Coach K coaching Duke basketball the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, when I looked at, it's funny when Shamari mentioned Charles Xavier standing, I was like, Leonardo DiCaprio meme for the X-Men, Wolverine, the X-Men fans. They were like, hey, Charles Xavier with the exos, the exo walking suit. But no, I mean, this was a really good storyline. We talked about again what we got with Charles Xavier. Like you said, getting into the mental aspect of Charles Xavier's story, and we didn't need so much minutia about what he's been going through. But
like I said, Cham, like he knew he was like he knew what was going on. Which I didn't expect that. I don't know. Did you expect that?
No. I didn't expect that. I mean, I knew he was gonna find out. The question was just how,
right?
So it was a matter of kind of getting him from point A to point B. Which, I mean, I guess I was kind of surprised that he was even able to do that. So I don't know if he has, because I mean, maybe I'm basing more off of like the movie Professor X, because he wasn't able to sense that far. He would need Cerebro for something like that. I know in the comics he kind of has like a portable Cerebro that he's like always linked to.
Right, that was in the Krakoa era that it's just been ended, but yeah, or it's about to end.
Yeah.
But yes,
but from my understanding, he doesn't have anything like that here.
No.
So it's interesting that he is still able to connect so far away to the X-Men. So, I mean, that's the thing that's probably more surprising for me. But yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I guess you could say it is somewhat like, I guess, disingenuous for him to kind of state that he is all in with Lilandra. I think he wants to be all in, which again is very Charles. I think he wants to be all in. Like he isn't like lying and saying that he doesn't want to be all in.
Right.
But it's just one of those things where it's just he can't let them go.
Well, he's the classic have my cake and eat it too guy. And I know it sounds like I'm crushing Charles, because I love Charles. But I mean, this is who he is. Like,
yeah, and that's not something that we didn't see in the original show. Right.
Right.
Like, there was always this thing. Lilandra's like, come away with me. And he's always like, I want to, but I can't. And, it's kind of the same thing we're seeing here.
Now, in defense of Charles Xavier, how much of in this episode were we shown like the crazy side of Lilandra's family and Lilandra's people, right?
Well,
like,
yeah.
Charles Xavier, like, man, you mean to tell me not only do I have to live here and deal with these people, but I also I have to forget everything about Earth. Like, I just have to fully tether myself to these people, like these maniacs.
Right.
I mean, there's Deathbury characters coming out. I mean, that whole part of this episode reminded me of like
kind of flaming eyes, black hair. That is Vulcan. Vulcan is Cyclops' brother. So we know you have Havoc. So you got Alex Summers. You got Scott Summers. And then you have Gabriel Summers, who was a part of the Shi'ar Empire. He's also a super powerful mutant. He appeared and he was in the clip that the same clip played before the episode. They put it out, I think maybe a day ago, a couple days ago. He was in this episode as part of the Imperial Guard. Now he doesn't say anything and he's there for a very brief moment, but he's there. So, we have now seen the entire Summers family. We already know about Kazar and the Starjammers. We already know about, of course, Havoc, who's been in the X-Men, the animated series. We know he's a part of X Factor. I don't know if X Factor still exists now that Forge is not there, but whatever. We know he's part of the world. And now Gabriel Summers, now the other lost Summers brother, also a part of the show officially. So that was just a very important cameo that did happen in this episode. We'll see if we know they're going to cross paths at some point. I'll be curious to see how soon that is. So, interesting note on how this episode, in that aspect of it, ends in terms of the Xavier episode of it ends. So we see, he takes these people to school, and it seems like he actually may be convincing them to change their ways, let him do what he wants to do. Again, doing Charles stuff. He's the best at this. And then it's when the moment happens where the genocide happens and the attack happens on Genosha that takes him out of it. All of a sudden, all those people that were in his class look like skeletons. He's a big image of Gambit, who also turns into a skeleton and he loses it, obviously, which, I would understand, considering how much he cares about mutants, how much he cares about, of course, his X-Men, how much he cares about Gambit. So, and that's where he kind of says, I have to go back. I can't turn my back on my people at this point. This has gotten, everything was good, and now it's not. So I got to go down there now and help save my X-Men. One note about this. So, the reaction he got was seeing Gambit. He didn't see Magneto. And there have been some questions about, and we talked about it a little bit last week. I don't think it was the Eagle Eye who mentioned it. Confirmed bodies, we didn't have that last week. Is Magneto actually dead? Is the question I had when I saw this play out. Because as much as I'm sure he loves Gambit, Magneto is like his brother. So if Magneto dies, I feel like that would be the moment that you would show his reaction of feeling that telepathically. And we don't get that. We get him seeing Gambit die and a bunch of other random mutants die, and that's the feeling season we get. So, do you think there's a chance, Sham, that Magneto may have survived that blast attack, and maybe he's been transported or something else? By the way, Gambit and Magneto not in the intro to this episode either. So this episode starts the intro with Cyclops. Nightcrawler is added, so I guess he'll be a part of the mix coming up. And the trailer that came out did have some scenes with Wolverine and Nightcrawler fighting, they're always a great tandem. Wolverine and Nightcrawler, to me, is Wolverine Jubilee, is Wolverine Nightcrawler, there's Wolverine Rogue. There are some tandems with the X-Men with Wolverine at work. Him and Wolverine may be number one in terms of his own pairing. So that should be an exciting episode down the line. But sorry to cut you off, Shane. But just a note again, Magneto and Gambit weren't in the intro, but it was Gambit's death that sent Xavier over the edge. He didn't seem to have any reaction or even know that Magneto, in our eyes, we thought was also killed.
Yeah, definitely something important to note. It's definitely possible, as you guys pointed out. We didn't see a body, so when you don't see a body, the door is always open. And Magneto is certainly powerful enough. There are other mutants around that, they showed Nightcrawlers. I don't think he would have got him out or anything like that, but there's definitely a chance.
A collaboration with Mr. Sinister. So all of the rumors about, could it be Cassandra Nova, who I said last week? Could it be Nimrod? There are all these different rumors about who. Yeah, Bastion. All these different rumors about who could have possibly led this attack. And shout out to the show. I said they told us that Mr. Sinister was the main villain, but the way everything went down, I assumed that they were gonna do something totally different, and that was a red herring, since we did see Mr. Sinister, and he did have a major point in the show where he obviously creates Madeline Pryor, the reveal there. But it feels like they're playing it straight that no, Mr. Sinister also was behind this. So very interesting for Mr. Sinister to want to commit a mass attack on mutants and genocide. Any thoughts, Sham, on the reveal of it being Mr. Sinister behind it, and why you feel like he would have wanted to do something like this?
Boring answer. I have no clue. I haven't the slightest idea. Drawing a blank in terms of why he would want to do this. He was always, from my understanding of the show, just obsessed with kind of creating the perfect mutant or the perfect being, through Scott and Jean. That was like his thing. So how this furthers that goal, I'm not sure. Um, Especially at an event like this many casualties. Not that it's like above or beyond his capacity, but it's just he also isn't someone to like waste his time. He was always very calculated and directed. He's not, a agent of chaos in the way like that many other villains are. So
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not sure. Um, I thought the reveal was cool though,
It was.
and I'm looking forward to hearing the explanation. Whenever they uh, whenever they explain, and I'm sure it'll be good. I mean, I've liked his character so far, um, and I can't say I was the biggest Mister Sinister person in the original show, but I think he's well. I mean, especially with what he's done so far, he's definitely more menacing in this one. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they reveal.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Sinister, I mean, in the scene, he says this is a prologue to a much bigger plan. So, as you said, Mr. Sinister, usually his whole thing is about mutant experimentation, mutant, um, kind of perfecting mutant genes and creating better and more powerful mutants. So, who's to say is a survival of the fittest? Is this a Thanos theory? Who knows why he would have wanted to do this? But it's not completely out of the realm of possibility and within his kind of thing to say, hey, I'm gonna kill a bunch of mutants for the sake of some other ulterior plan, because we now know that he has an ulterior plan. It is not his plan. Again, it's a prologue. It's not my goal was to just kill mutants and create again a genocide on a country. It's beyond that. So I guess we'll have to see it over the next few weeks what that plan could potentially entail. We already know it entailed Madeline Pryor. It entailed Cable. He
Yeah.
didn't have. We know he was trying to make Cable into like a perfect mutant, and then he contracts that virus. So that part of it he didn't quite get. And considering Cable, we know has been going in and out from the future and the past, trying to prevent this attack. I assume him and Cable will indeed cross paths very soon. But Mr. Sinister
Yeah.
being a part of this will certainly be the headline of probably definitely the last 3 episodes probably of this season. Kendall.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I feel like um my theory is, I feel like because you guys make a good point. I mean, we talked about it last week. This doesn't necessarily feel like Mr. Sinister's MO. Like Shamari said, he's not necessarily a total chaos agent or anything like that. But to me, the thing that comes to mind for me is why attack Genosha?
Maybe he wasn't like completely tuned in, but like he definitely had some again idea. And you're right. If Sinister realizes that Xavier is alive, he's an extremely powerful telepath, and he's kidnapped Xavier before to help with his scheme. So definitely would make sense that he may say, hey, in order to pull someone out, I gotta do something rash, and this could be what Mr. Sinister wanted to pull. I want to talk a little bit about Storm before we get out of here. So we had the Storm aspect of the story. Again, this is New Generation Media episode recap 6 of the X-Men 97 series on Marvel and Disney Plus. So Storm kind of comes head to head with Adversary, where this version of Adversary a little different than the comics. Um, Definitely still a connection to Forge, but we see this version is a manifestation of someone's own self doubt, someone's own inner demons that gets brought out, and Storm has to battle that. And the crux of the battle is Storm and this doubt about whether or not life as a human is actually better. And it was a really good callback to episode 2 when she has a conversation with Jean that I think most people right felt like, I don't want to say it was a throwaway, only because we see she's been living as a human, but I think they connected it much deeper than the surface level of like, okay, here's her saying life as a human may be good and now she has to live it. Like this was actually like, hey, she's been presenting herself as like this person that is very proud to be a mutant and kind of talks about life as a human and being quote unquote normal. It's just like, oh, it's like a daydream, that'd be nice. But we see that there's actually a lot of self hatred and self doubt that like Storm lives with, and it manifests in Adversary, which I thought was a pretty neat and obviously probably a needed update to that character. Sham, how'd you feel about how they handled Storm? She is forced to face a lot of fears, not just the self doubt that she talks about, but also the physical fears. I mean, when Ford takes her to that cave, he's like, "All right, I know you're not really great with sight spaces, but if you want to help me, you got to go through there." So then there's the physical aspect of the claustrophobia that she also has problems with as well that she has to face on. So it's definitely true to a Storm, Aurora Monroe kind of like battle, inner demon battle, no pun intended. But she comes out in the end, and new look, mohawk's gone, full head of hair back, iconic black costume now. First time ever we're seeing that on this series, whether X-Men animated series or it's X-Men 97. How'd you feel how Storm's story kind of rounded out here?
I liked it. I still think that there wasn't much like meat to the love story, I guess you could say. So if you're like a romance person, maybe you were missing a little bit more there.
Yeah.
But as everyone, of course, watching is aware, probably, I was more concerned with Storm getting her powers back and that being a cool moment, and it was a very cool moment. The Adversary, as you said, was definitely more of like a mental, like inner, kind of battling your inner demons kind of villain.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very fitting, especially considering what Storm is.
Forward, very intense feelings for sure.
But but no, I mean that part or that arc, the Adversary stuff reminded me a lot of like a Studio Ghibli Miyazaki anime, movie, Spirited Away and stuff like that. With like this creature, and it's all like you guys mentioned, all kind of a mental thing, not really a physical battle. Very trippy in that sense. You really don't know, what's happening. Kind of a horror element to it as well. So they did a good job with that. I think it's so weird again, like you said, because the episode is titled Lifedeath, and it does feel like a little bit of a B plot. And the last episode that we had with this. I wouldn't say it was a B plot, but it was kind of like a little muted because it was the first half of the story. So it ended up being kind of a weird arc a little bit, but like Shamari said, I mean, the primary goal was to get that, to get Storm's powers back. How it happened, I don't think a lot of us really cared that much, as long as it did happen, and and that moment of her getting her powers back. Was good. Like you said, we had the sort of, anime transformation.
I was gonna say, it's very anime influence for sure. Yeah.
Her getting her, new character design and everything. That was great. And I mean, it's like you talked about, EJ, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, the report that we were going to get new costumes for everybody. As far as, we don't know. You obviously can't verify all the stuff that you see, but this is the first domino for the new costume.
One down. Yeah.
Yeah, one down.
One less we got to worry about.
So we'll see who else. I feel like Jean Grey is definitely probably second most likely to get a new update. An update
for sure. Yeah.
For the costume, and then from there, we'll see. Wolverine probably least likely, but we'll see what happens with him as well. But I mean, it's interesting. I mean, again, I think they played that well in terms of her getting her powers back so soon, and just where they hit the ground running from here, I don't know. But like you guys said, classic Storm, inner demon storyline, not the first version of the story that's been told, but it was done well. I think the question maybe should it have been split into two parts like this, and I feel like they structured it like this in part because they had multiple stories they wanted to tell. and you couldn't have done them. You didn't do it like this, and you may not have been able to do the Charleston stuff as well if you didn't do it like this. But
Yeah.
I don't know if the episode was maybe helped by, because it's rare. I mean, I don't know. This is the rare part 1, part 2 story in any TV show that's not like consecutive episodes.
Right.
Very rarely do you see that where it's like, yeah, part 2 of that episode that you saw 5 weeks ago. So that is so that's a rare thing, and I don't really know if it helped it. Not that, you know, I'm glad we got last week's episode. Like you said, it's an all timer. That would be, I guess, my only question to the creative team behind this.
And I appreciate that. And I think it's really neat that, like, you know, Forge's his machine worked. It wasn't him that screwed up, you know, Storm not being able to get the powers. It was her. It was her, like, not being able to get over that extra hurdle of really reconnecting with that side of herself that wasn't allowing her to be the you know, Omega level goddess mutant that she is. But I think this is a good place to give scores for this episode. So I'll go to Kendall first. What are you going to give Life Death Part 2 out of 10?
Life Death Part 2, I'll go 7.5. I thought that this was a good episode. A little bit of a step back from last week's, but it was more of a catch you up on again where these characters have been, which is not a problem, you know, because again, in the grand scheme of what this show is trying to do, like Bo DeMeo said it in his, you know, statement last week that, you know, episode 5 is a warm up, and that 8, 9, 10 are, you know, sort of the main course, so to speak. You know, he didn't say necessarily 6 and 7, but he's just being honest, you know, and it's not like, I'm sure he's proud of his work, but, you know, he knows that this episode was not necessarily supposed to be super action packed. But I can see, like, you can see the forest through the trees and be like, and say to yourself, man, like, wait, Charles is going to be back next episode? Like, next episode now, a lot is on the table, you know?
Right, yeah.
Like, Charles is going to be back. Storm, again, we're going to get real aftermath of what happened. I mean, who knows? Like, next episode could be it has a lot of potential. Is it a pure grievance episode, or, you know, a grief episode, or is it more of a, or is it, you know, kind of more of an action-packed episode? I don't know, but between that and then again what we've heard about the 3-parter to end the series or to end the season with 8, 9, and 10, a lot is on the horizon for this show.
Yeah, next week is episode 7 titled Bright Eyes. And we'll have then the 3-part finale, which is Tolerance is Extinction, parts 1, 2, and 3. So big finale coming
By the
up.
way, not to cut you off, but when we talked about confirmed deaths, we also haven't necessarily confirmed that Madeline Pryor's dead, right? Like, I mean, we think she's.
I don't think we never. I don't remember. I don't think her body was one of the bodies we saw.
No.
Shamari,
she
I
was
don't
the
remember.
first one that was kind of blown, so you're just like, oh, she was like, you definitely didn't survive that.
I don't think that even if these deaths are not permanent, I don't think that they would kill off Madeline Pryor. I think there's way too much for her to do still.
They spent too much time in the beginning of the.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. Emma Frost also was not any of the confirmed deaths either, which I think is important too. She seems still very leaving some of the, again, interpersonal Storm Force stuff behind, and that was a missing element that I think really hurt that story. So overall, though, a really solid episode. I think the right tone. Like, I mean, look, if you can give me 10 balls to the walls episodes that are incredible, like, I mean, I would take that. But it's probably really hard to do, and in a certain point, it gets a little cheap to kind of give you so much, again, craziness. Like, you know, there's that kind of saying, like, you can't have ice cream every day. You know, you got to eat your vegetables. This episode felt a little better than eating vegetables. I mean, again, Charles Xavier shows up. Like, oh my God, I did not expect this to happen, at least not at this point in the season. And they kind of have a really full exploration of kind of where he's at was important. And I thought, to both of you guys' points, I really thought the characterization of Professor X in this episode was excellent. Like, as good or better than anything that was done in the original show. So, again, I think they really kind of leaned into, like, this is a very This is a person who thinks very highly of themselves. Is very pompous. It's not wrong. He's extremely intelligent. He's extremely smart, and like he makes great points. And because he's done the work, he's dedicated to this cause. But like, there's a little like underhandedness to him. There is a little like I'll say this to do another thing and kind of just misdirect you here. He's a guy who always thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. Most people probably would if you could read everybody's minds at all times. Charles's character makes a lot of sense for who he is as a person and what moves him and his abilities. So he was awesome. I think that part of this was really my favorite part of this episode, and just him, taking them to the astral plane to do a class lesson again. So pompous, but the fact that also showing he's in this place where everybody's big and strong and they beat everybody up and everybody's so powerful, to kind of to really cut everybody down, a peg basically by saying y'all are very strong maybe physically, but mentally y'all ain't nothing, and let me really tell you what it's about. It was classic Charles Xavier.
And in his nature, he's still a teacher.
He's always
she even introduces him as Professor Charles Xavier. These people are like, "What's a professor?"
Right, I know they probably don't know what that word is, right? And
right.
So yeah, I dug it. I even dug some of the Shi'ar Empire's reaction to Charles and what he's about and how they view humans and mutants, and he's actually we don't even like humans, and he's actually taking a lower class of human because he's a mutant and they're not they're the lower class on Earth. Even that was I think really fascinating because yes, we see the humans often talk about how oh, these people are whatever, but they're the gifted. That's how we view them. They're the gifted, they're the special. Even if they're hated, we view them as the higher breed. 'Cause I guess we're always telling these stories from the perspective of the X-Men or the Brotherhood or Magneto. You know what I'm saying? Here to kind of see the outside view, being well, from the outside, they don't seem to like y'all. Y'all don't have a lot of power, so y'all are the lower class of the humans.
Yeah, you guys aren't even pure human.
Yeah, you're not pure human. You're the lower class of the people on Earth, or a country. A planet we don't even respect. Again, GR Empire came across they did a really good job with them as well. So this was a solid episode, real fun.
I love when Professor X was when Deathbird called him out on something, and he was like, "Well, you're just dramatic." Eventually, he was tired of the
who's the most popular team. Outside of Spider-Man, no other comic book sold more. So seeing that excitement and seeing just how much they this is just every Wednesday, it just takes up the oxygen of the conversation on social media. It's something, if you're not talking about sports or rap beef that's happening, this is the big thing that's happening every week. It just speaks to the power of the X-Men. So I want to shout out the X-Men community for letting everybody know X-Men again still king when it comes to this Marvel game. But that's gonna do it for this edition of New Generation's Hero Talk presentation, our review episode. We've been here every week. We've been committed to it. So we'll be back again next week. Another episode recap. Episode 7 will be the next one. So make sure you keep it locked on the YouTube channel. Again, you can just make sure you hit that subscribe button. New Generation Media is where you'll find us on YouTube. Make sure you, of course, follow me on Twitter, EG_Stewart. Our social handle is New Generation Pod on Twitter. And make sure you also follow us all individually. Besides me, you got Sham, MC Sham22 on Instagram, TikTok, Kendall on Twitter, New Gen Ken. Thank you guys again so much for checking us out. We'll be back next week talking more X-Men at 97. For Shamari, for Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.